Welcome to A Simple Life. Today we are going to talk about footwear on the farm and on the homestead because, well, I'm kind of qualified to talk about it. I've worked in the footwear industry for multiple companies for the last 20 years, right around 20 years. And I live on a farm and homestead, whatever you want to call it. We grow stuff. How about that? And then we eat it. None of what I'm going to talk about today is sponsored by any of these companies. Everything I'm going to talk to you about today is my opinion on products I bought myself and I have tested and worn and I love. I love them so much. In some cases, I've bought multiple pairs, and in other cases, I didn't buy any more of them. And that's not to pick on the company, it's just their footwear did not work for what I was using them for. All right, let me show you the boots that I think are great, why I wear them, and what they do for me. I found that the thing that I relied on the most every day were my boots. If my feet were in pain, if they were cold, if they were wet, I was miserable and I just couldn't work. When I realized the problem I was having, I started trying to figure out what boots can I wear, what boots are gonna last, what boots are gonna put up, what boots are gonna be comfortable, what's gonna keep my foot from hurting at the end of the day. And I started with, well, stuff I had, stuff I can get my hands on fairly inexpensively. I started with like a military-esque kind of training hiking boot. I figured, hey, if it's good enough for the military to train in it, then hey, it'll be perfect for me. I'll be able to use these and work with them. Well, it turns out they're just not made for homestead farm abuse. The other thing I needed something that I could use during the wet, nasty parts of the year that we have here in the Pacific Northwest, and we have a lot of them. So I started looking at Muck boots, and well, I went with what everybody uses, lacrosse. And I was like, I'm gonna use lacrosse. So I started with like the neoprene ones. I'll put a picture up. And then I moved to like heavy duty ones, and I moved to multiple different types. I kept trying different ones, and none of them lasted more than a couple months. And when I say a couple months, we're talking like 3-4 months before they would be split, rips. They just didn't hold up to what we put up with here in the Pacific Northwest when you're actively working on a homestead. So one day we had a mobile butcher come out and they were butchering a cow for us. And I asked him, I go, hey, what kind of boots do you use? And so he showed me, I'll show you what they are. And he said, they last about a year. I said, right, okay, sure, they last a year. I'm thinking to myself, they don't last a year because none of my other boots have ever lasted anywhere close to a year. Well, I have to say, these Tingley Premium G2 boots, I'll put a link down in the description. Yes, they last a year. They last a year having the daylights beat out of them by me. And what I mean by that is just because it's winter or it's wet out doesn't mean I'm not out putting fence in, logging, milling. We work basically through the whole entire year. And so the only thing I had go wrong with the last pair I had is I literally wore a hole straight through them. That was what happened to them. I wore a hole straight through the heel and they started leaking on me. The good part about these boots is they have a really nice insole that comes with them. I'm gonna pull it out. Yep, there you go. So it has this insole and it's fairly comfortable. So I'd gone through about 10 different pairs of Muck boot kind of boots before I came across these. One of the pains of wearing a Muck boot in the fall, winter, and spring is your socks. I found that your socks just slowly want to sink down to your toes and fall off. It's like a magic trick. You know the sock monster when you're a kid? Well, there's a sock monster in every single Muck boot and they want to steal your socks. The way I deal with that is, I just came across it. It was a complete accident. Is you put on like a thin dress sock that goes up real high, maybe almost up to the top of your calf. Doesn't have to go that high, but it can. And then you put your nice wool, winter, or whatever, your thicker sock over that. And those two socks together actually keep each other in place. I don't know how it does it. I'm not a scientist. I just know that when I do it, my socks stay up. And I don't lose a sock to the sock monster that lives inside my Muck boots. That's one of the tricks I've learned. The other thing about a boot like this that basically is just a slightly reinforced toe with rubber is your feet are going to get cold. And that's the other reason for wearing a good like wool sock and maybe even doubling them up. I talk about that and I keep talking about like keeping my feet warm. because I find that keeping your feet warm, your hands warm, and not having them cold is probably one of the main things that you can do to keep working through a full day out on the farm, on the homestead, wherever you're at. I find that if I can keep my hands and my feet warm, I can almost stay outside indefinitely within reason. Okay, we're not talking Alaska freezing my tushies off. I still didn't solve my issue of the rest of the year. What was I going to use that would actually hold up? I tried some solo hiking boots. I tried a bunch of different stuff. They just didn't hold up. So I started looking into what other people in the Pacific Northwest were using. And I came across a company called Nick's Custom Boots. There's a couple other companies that build boots very similar to them. And I ordered a pair. It's the most expensive thing I've ever bought when it came to clothes. No, they were about $500. And I remember basically pitching the idea to my wife that I'd be able to buy them. I could use them for about 2 years. I could send them back and have them resold or rebuilt. And then I'd get them back and I'd be able to use them for another 2 or 3 years before I needed to send them back in. And overall, that was going to be cheaper than me buying a pair of boots every 3, 6, 9 months, whatever it was. So I did that. It was 2020 and I ordered a pair of Nick's boots. They're Builder Pros. Very similar to these. I love them. And I wore them for 2.5 years, and then I sent them back to have them rebuilt. Now, there was a little bit of a mishap. I sent my boots in, and I wanted a few things changed on them. I wanted them built exactly the way they were built, but I wanted them to be insulated because 6 months out of the year, I end up putting a thin sock on with a wool sock over it. And the reason for that is my feet get cold. And when my feet get cold, they're cold the rest of the day. So I figured Nick's had this product that they were putting in their boots that was super thin and it would insulate the boot. And it was like $100. And I'm like, well, if it means my feet are warmer the rest of the year, I'm happy with this. So I sent my boots in. They came back rebuilt and they weren't right. They weren't right in a lot of ways. And I contacted Nick's and they made it right by sending me a brand new pair of boots.
Well, I got my boots back. And no, these are not my rebuilt boots. These are a new pair because we had a little issue.
These boots fit me like a glove to the point where if it's a nice day and I want to take a nap, I don't take my boots off. I just kick my feet up and fall asleep in a hammock or something. Part of a boot like this, a handmade boot that's made of real thick leather and it's really well built, you're going to need to break your boots in. With these, I took my time and I wore them a couple days a week for about 3 months and kind of broke them in nice and slow. With these, I put them on and I just wore them. I put them on the first day I got them and I wore them for probably 8 to 10 hours. And the next day and the next day, there was a couple things I had to do to break them in. One of the things I did to help them break in and my ankle and stuff not to be sore is I left this area a little loose, just loose enough it was tolerable. Then once the boots started breaking in and got more and more comfortable, I kept tightening it down to the point where now the boots are completely broken in and they're like a glove to me. The break-in period for these is going to take you probably about a month or two, depending on how much you wear them. If you have boots that you're used to wearing and they're kind of like this, but maybe they're like a box store brand, and you're going to pick up a pair of Nick's or JK's or White's or any of the great handmade boots here in the Pacific Northwest, highly suggest just take your time, break them in. There are going to be some days where your feet are a little sore when you first start breaking them in. But once you get used to them, and once the leather starts forming to your foot, you are going to be in heaven. The leather just naturally kind of hugs your foot and embraces your foot. And then your foot's not sliding around. You're not fighting for traction with your toes. You're not trying to keep your heel from rising and falling. Everything is real locked in. If I was to go back to the very first day that we moved to the farm, before I bought any extra tools, I would have bought a pair of these. Because while they are heavy, once they fit your foot, they fit your foot like a glove. I can wear them for 16 hours working my butt off. No blisters, nothing. I mean, my feet aren't sore at the end of the day. They're not padded. There's no insole in there. You're just sitting against leather that's conformed to your foot. That is very important. You don't need cushioning for your feet to be comfortable. What you need is for your foot to be embraced, like a warm, soft hug. And in this case, it's not very soft, but it is a warm hug. And so that warm hug really allows my foot to expand and contract as I go through my stride, as well as it keeps everything lined up. And I have a little bit, you can kind of tell from some of my boots, this side overhangs this way just a little bit. You can see it right there. So I pronate just a little on my left foot. Because of the way these are made, when I break them in, they break into my foot. Now, I could go to a doctor and have that pronation fixed by putting like a little wedge in there, but it's not really worth it because it's so subtle and it's not a big deal and it doesn't hurt me, that pronation. But what these boots have done is they've allowed me to work for a really long amount of time on really uneven surfaces and still enjoy myself. They are heavy. That is the downside to them. They are heavy. But like anything, you get used to that. Before I got my boots rebuilt, I realized I had one other need. There's basically portions of the year when I work in my shop or I come up and run the mill or I do something and I don't need an aggressive sole that's going to need to pick up a lot of mud. So I had Nick's build me a pair of mock toe boots with a foam sole. I love these. The downside of these is this foam sole really is for hard surfaces. It is not meant at all for the woods, for anything other than very flat, concrete-esque kind of surfaces. These are the boots that I love. I love the other two pair of boots too, but these are the boots that if I was to pick two pair of boots, I'd pick these Tingley premium G2s. You can get them for like as cheap as 45, 50 bucks, and they are great, an amazing purchase. And these guys, which are not cheap, at about $550. And if you insulate them, they can get up around $650. So these are expensive, but if you take care of the leather by conditioning them and doing some other practices to them, they will last a really long time. Thank you guys so much for joining us on A Simple Life. I've been entertaining my boys with a bunch of horrible outtakes, which I'll include here just because, well, life's too short not to have fun. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
The best part about these boots is if you're ever in a dire situation, you can always eat them. That is actually why Nick's makes the leather so thick. Did you know they work perfect for blocking out your kids' laughter when they're laughing at you? The best part about these boots are guaranteed to make your dress look absolutely beautiful. If you don't believe me, you can ask my boys.